Japan is often portrayed as a nation of safety and discipline. Yet beneath the polished image lie stories that dismantle this illusion. Atrocities so merciless they scarred generations. These are not legends born from superstition, but crimes carved into history with cruelty so deliberate they feel inhuman. What makes them terrifying is their reality: pain endured in silence, wounds too deep for time to erase, and shadows that still press against Japan's collective memory. Some crimes are whispered because their details remain unbearable. Victims whose voices were silenced still echo in neighborhoods, courtrooms, and dreams. Horror is not always supernatural. True terror is human, where innocence is destroyed, compassion abandoned, and cruelty thrives. These crimes reveal humanity's darkest face, where morality collapses. They linger not in folklore, but in headlines, reports, and the silence of memory. The first story is Junko Furuta's tragedy, 44 Days of Suffering, that revealed the absolute limits of cruelty. Then, The Shadow of Tsutomu Miyazaki, a predator whose obsessions transformed him into one of Japan's most feared killers. Finally, the Sagamihara Massacre, where dozens of lives were stolen in a single night of hatred. These are not just stories of death. They are revelations of what occurs when society's protections fail and darkness takes absolute control. These cases shook Japan not only because of their brutality, but because they defied the very sense of order the country treasures. They were not accidents, not fleeting impulses of anger, but deliberate cruelty. Each crime tore apart the illusion of safety, forcing society to confront its darkest truths. Even decades later, their impact remains carved into memory, a reminder that horror is not confined to shadows, it thrives within the ordinary and familiar. To hear these stories is to enter spaces most avoid, a home turned into a chamber of torture, quiet streets where a killer hunted unseen, and a care facility transformed into a massacre site. Each setting was familiar, ordinary, even safe, until cruelty rewrote its meaning. That is what makes them unforgettable. They did not happen in abandoned ruins or dark legends. They happened in the open, shattering the fragile comfort of normal life forever. Tonight, you will hear 3 of the most brutal crimes in Japan's modern history. Listen closely, but know this: what you are about to hear will stay with you long after the final word. These are not stories told for comfort, but scars retold in whispers. Subscribe to Echoes of the East, and, if you dare, comment where in the world you are watching from. Some shadows travel further than borders, and tonight, they may reach you. In 1988, Japan was forced to confront cruelty beyond imagination. Junko Furuta, a bright 17-year-old girl, became the victim of one of the most merciless crimes in the nation's history. Her disappearance began as an ordinary walk home, but ended as a prolonged nightmare. For 44 days, she endured suffering that stripped her humanity, piece by piece. The horror was not hidden in shadows. It happened inside a suburban home, ordinary in appearance, yet transformed into hell. That house became her prison, disguised as an average family dwelling. Curtains stayed closed, voices muffled, while neighbors went about their lives, unaware of the nightmare unfolding nearby. Inside, Junko's reality was dismantled each day by captors who treated her pain as entertainment. The air in that house grew heavy, each wall absorbing the echoes of cruelty. From the outside, it was just another home in Tokyo. Inside, it became a chamber of relentless torment. Junko's suffering stretched for 44 days, time that felt like eternity. Every sunrise promised not relief, but another descent into cruelty. What makes her case unbearable is not only what was done, but how ordinary the perpetrators seemed. Boys her own age, indistinguishable from any others. The horror was not distant. It lived within familiar faces, in trusted neighborhoods. That truth is what unsettles most. Evil was not hidden in legends, it was sitting quietly next door. Her captors invented new ways to prolong her agony. Each day stretched into another trial where suffering became routine. The cruelty was not impulsive, was intentional, carefully designed to strip her of dignity and hope. Survivors who later read her story described sleepless nights, unable to imagine surviving even a fraction of what she endured. Her endurance became terrifying in itself, proof of a human spirit forced to withstand pain beyond comprehension. Opportunities to save her were wasted. At one point, police even visited the house, but accepted lies from her captors, leaving her inside to suffer. Friends of the boys came and went, some joining the cruelty, others watching silently. Every silence condemned her further. The failure was not only theirs, but society's. Junko's cries for help went unheard, swallowed by indifference. She remained imprisoned, abandoned by the very world that should have protected her. By the time her ordeal ended, Junko was broken. Her body, her mind, her will, everything had been consumed by cruelty. Her captors ended her life with the same coldness they showed from the beginning, discarding her as though she were nothing. They sealed her body in a drum of concrete, as if hoping to bury the evidence along with her humanity. That act remains one of the most haunting symbols of her tragedy. When her body was discovered, Japan recoiled in horror. Newspapers reported the crime with caution, but the fragments revealed were enough to terrify an entire nation. People questioned how such cruelty could exist so close to home. Parents feared for their children, neighborhoods whispered in disbelief, and the name Junko Furuta became synonymous with the collapse of safety. Her tragedy was no longer only hers, it was a wound carved into Japan's collective conscience. The trial only deepened the outrage. Because the killers were juveniles, the justice system shielded them from the full weight of punishment. Their sentences were seen as insultingly light, some serving only a handful of years before walking free. Families of victims and survivors alike felt betrayed. The injustice became part of Junko's legacy, her suffering amplified by a system that failed to honor her memory. The crime scarred her nation, the verdict scarred it further. Even after demolition, the house remained infamous. Locals claimed the land felt cursed, air heavy, and unwelcoming. Construction workers reported dizziness, tools vanishing, and strange whispers at night. Some swore they saw a schoolgirl's figure standing silently at the edge of the lot. Though walls were torn down, suffering clung to the soil itself. The neighborhood carried her memory like a wound that refused to heal, proof that not all tragedies fade with time. Junko's story spread beyond Japan, becoming one of the most disturbing crimes recognized worldwide. For many, she represents the absolute vulnerability of innocence in the face of unchecked cruelty. She endured 44 days that no one should have survived. The horror lies not just in her death, but in her life during those days in existence, reduced to suffering. Her memory forces the world to confront the deepest failure of humanity, silence in the face of pain. Some say her spirit lingers, not out of vengeance, but because the torment was too great to release. People claim those who study her case too closely begin to experience strange phenomenal lights flickering, unsettling dreams, or sensations of being watched. Perhaps it is superstition, or perhaps her suffering carved itself into reality. Junko's name clings to memory like a shadow, demanding recognition, ensuring her story will never be buried or silenced again. What terrifies most is not only her suffering, but how ordinary her captors appeared. They were teenagers, indistinguishable from any others, proof that cruelty does not require monsters from folklore. Evil can grow behind familiar doors, inside trusted homes, and where the face of those we overlooked. Junko's case shattered the illusion that safety comes from familiarity. It revealed a truth more disturbing than any ghost story. The worst horrors are entirely human. For the families, her loss was compounded by injustice. Birthdays passed uncelebrated, memories tainted by cruelty. The nation carried guilt, knowing more could have been done. Junko's story became a warning repeated across generations, a reminder that silence enables cruelty. Her suffering remains one of Japan's darkest legacies, retold not only in courts and documentaries, but in whispers that carry her name with reverence and dread. She is remembered not as victim, but as scar. Junko Furuta's tragedy is remembered as one of the most brutal crimes in Japan's history. It revealed the depths of cruelty humans are capable of, the failures of justice, and the silence of society. Her story does not fade, it continues to haunt. To speak her name is to acknowledge unbearable suffering, but also to resist forgetting. She endures in memory, not for vengeance, but as a chilling reminder of what must never be repeated. In the late 1980s, Japan faced a predator whose crimes scarred the nation. Tsutomu Miyazaki became known as the otaku killer, a name forever tied to his obsessions. Behind his quiet, awkward appearance hid a darkness that grew unchecked. His victims were children, chosen deliberately, lured into situations where innocence would be destroyed. What shocked Japan most was not only the brutality, but the calm precision with which he blurred fantasy into horrifying reality. Miyazaki's childhood was marked by isolation and ridicule. Born with physical deformities in his hands, he withdrew from others, seeking escape in manga, horror films, and disturbing fantasies. His home became a shrine to obsession, thousands of tapes stacked to the ceiling, walls closing in with violent imagery. To outsiders, he seemed shy, perhaps strange, but harmless. In truth, his loneliness fermented into hunger. That hunger demanded victims, and soon, imagination alone was not enough. Between 1988 and 1989, Miyazaki abducted 4 girls, aged 4 to 7. He murdered them, preserving their agony through photographs and rituals. Japan struggled to grasp how such evil came from someone so ordinary. His crimes were not impulsive, but calculated and ritualistic. He documented everything as though curating a collection. Each act blurred the line between fantasy and reality, creating a nightmare Japan could not awaken from. Adding to the horror, Miyazaki taunted grieving families. He sent letters and phone calls, cruelly extending their torment. Parents received postcards containing disturbing details only the killer could know, turning mourning into renewed terror. For them, the crime did not end with death, it lingered in reminders that their loved ones had suffered. Miyazaki enjoyed control not only over his victims, but over those left behind. He thrived on their despair, feeding his twisted sense of power. His arrest in 1989 revealed the depths of his obsessions. Investigators found more than 5,000 videotapes stacked floor to ceiling. Many contained graphic horror, disturbing pornography, and even recordings of his crimes. Officers described the room as suffocating, a labyrinth where reality had long been abandoned. The apartment itself felt like an extension of his mind, chaotic, claustrophobic, and terrifying, a physical manifestation of his descent into darkness. Japan recoiled in shock. The word otaku, once harmless, became tied to his crimes. Parents feared their children's hobbies, believing manga and anime could corrupt innocence. Newspapers painted Miyazaki as a monster of obsession, while experts debated psychological fractures. Some argued isolation shaped him more than media, but the stigma endured. His crimes didn't just kill, they infected culture, twisting a subculture into something feared and misunderstood for years. During interrogation, Miyazaki spoke with chilling calmness. He showed no remorse, no recognition of horror. Psychologists described him as detached from reality, lost in a world where victims became objects, trophies to feed his hunger. He believed the children lived on within him, absorbed through his acts. His words unsettled even seasoned investigators. He was not confused or unaware, he was deliberate. His mind had abandoned empathy entirely, replaced by fantasies too dark to comprehend. Courtrooms turned into stages for his unsettling persona. Evidence showed meticulous planning. He stalked neighborhoods, studied routines, and chose victims with chilling care. He collected notes, photos, and relics of suffering, archiving his nightmare. Witnesses recalled his unsettling smiles and eerie detachment. The trial gripped the nation, not just for its brutality, but because it revealed a collapse of humanity so deep it erased the line between man and monster. For the family's grief never ended. Their children's faces became public, their innocence permanently tied to horror. Each headline forced them to relive the nightmare. Many withdrew, avoiding interviews, unable to speak their daughters' names without breaking. Their silence became its own testimony that some wounds never heal. No sentence could erase the depth of pain Miyazaki left behind. Their lives had been stolen, and their grief became another scar Japan would always carry. His trial lasted years, consumed by debates over sanity. Defense lawyers claimed he was insane, trapped in delusions. Experts argued he knew exactly what he was doing, carefully choosing and recording his crimes. The courtroom echoed with arguments not only about one man, but about the meaning of responsibility itself. In the end, the verdict was clear. Miyazaki was sane enough to face justice. His punishment was death by hanging, announced in chilling silence. Even awaiting execution, Miyazaki remained unrepentant. He sketched grotesque cartoons, spoke in bizarre tones, and gave unsettling interviews. Reporters described him as alien, incapable of human connection. He never expressed regret, never acknowledged the humanity of those he killed. To the very end, he remained consumed by his fantasies. When his execution was carried out in 2008, some felt closure, but many admitted his shadow would never disappear. His crimes had already become immortal. The case left scars beyond the victims' families. It reshaped culture, spread fear, and stained a subculture. Parents watched hobbies more closely, mistrust filling homes. Others argued the true horror was society's blindness, how an isolated man slipped into violence unchecked. His crimes became a warning. Obsession left to rot can turn monstrous. Miyazaki became not only a killer, but a symbol of loneliness, mutating into devastation. Places tied to his crimes remained tainted. Streets where children once played grew silent. Families moved away, unwilling to live under the shadow of tragedy. Locals spoke of strange sensations, children's voices in empty alleys, flickering lights in deserted corners. Rational or not, the weight of his crimes infected the land itself. For many, the horror did not die with him. His acts had permanently marked the world, leaving echoes impossible to silence. Tsutomu Miyazaki remains one of Japan's most infamous killers. His name is remembered not for who he was, but for what he did, the innocence he stole, the grief he created, and the scars he left behind. His crimes remind us that the darkest monsters are not myths or shadows, but people among us. Miyazaki proved that evil can live in ordinary faces, waiting quietly until obsession consumes empathy and leaves only cruelty behind. In July 2016, Japan was forced to confront the deadliest mass killing in its modern history. The location was Tsukui Yamaurian, a care facility for the disabled in Sagamihara. It was meant to be a place of protection, a refuge for society's most vulnerable. Instead, it became a site of horror. In a single night, safety collapsed. 19 people were murdered, dozens more wounded, and an entire nation realized silence can be fatal. The killer was Satoshi Umatsu, a former employee. To many, he seemed eccentric but harmless. Yet behind that appearance hid disturbing beliefs. He claimed the lives of the disabled had no value, words dismissed as the ramblings of a troubled man. But hatred never dissolved, festered. When ignored, it grew into resolve. Umatsu shaped his ideology into a promise of blood, deciding society would listen to him only through violence. That promise became reality. Months before the massacre, he delivered a letter to politicians declaring his intentions. He wrote that he would kill hundreds of disabled individuals to save Japan. Authorities confined him briefly, judged him unstable, then released him. That failure would cost lives. On July 26, 2016, he returned to the facility he once worked at. Armed with knives, he arrived with quiet determination, stepping into rooms where residents slept peacefully, unaware of what approached. Around 2 a.m., Umatsu broke into the facility. Darkness filled the hallways, silence broken only by his footsteps. Patients slept defenseless, many unable to call for help. Staff on duty were powerless against him. In less than an hour, the facility transformed into a nightmare. Room after room, he attacked with chilling efficiency. When it ended, 19 were dead and 26 wounded. Japan awoke to news that felt impossible: mass slaughter within a place of care. Survivors later described the chaos: screams piercing the night, alarms sounding, footsteps running but never fast enough. Some residents could not cry out, their conditions leaving them in silent terror. Nurses tried to shield patients, but they were overpowered. The massacre unfolded with relentless speed. Those who survived carried trauma far deeper than physical wounds. Even years later, many described nightmares that replayed that night, unable to close their eyes without hearing screams. When police arrived, the killer surrendered without resistance. He confessed calmly, even proudly. He showed no remorse, insisting his victims were burdens. Investigators described him as chillingly detached. It was not just the brutality that horrified Japan, it was the ideology behind it. This was not random violence, but a deliberate extermination, fueled by twisted belief. In his words, the disabled deserved death. In his hands, 19 innocent lives were erased without hesitation. Families rushed to the facility as news spread. The scenes were devastating. Parents collapsed in grief. Siblings held each other tightly. Names shouted into the air with no reply. Their loved ones had been attacked while sleeping, stripped of dignity in the cruelest way. What horrified the nation most was not only the deaths, but who the victims were: the most vulnerable members of society, slaughtered in a place meant to protect them. The massacre forced Japan to confront uncomfortable truths. How could a man with clear warnings be free to kill? Why were his letters dismissed? The answers pointed to negligence. His hatred had been recorded, yet ignored. Authorities called him unstable, but not dangerous. That mistake gave him opportunity. The tragedy revealed how easily society overlooks the vulnerable, not only the disabled, but those who speak of harming them. Silence enabled massacre as much as the blade. Out of respect, the victims' names were withheld, a decision rooted in cultural privacy. Yet some questioned whether anonymity erased their humanity again. They were more than numbers, more than statistics. They were lives, families, voices silenced unjustly. Strangers brought flowers and candles to the site, memorials appearing quietly. Even without names, the weight of their absence was felt. In mourning, Sagamihara became a symbol of remembrance, of a grief too deep for words. The site of the massacre became haunted by silence. Locals avoided it after dark, claiming the air felt wrong, as if filled with invisible cries. Construction workers reported dizziness, tools vanishing, or faint voices whispering their names. Whether psychological or something more, the weight of tragedy lingered. The ground felt scarred, refusing to release what had occurred. For many, the massacre became not only history, but a presence woven into the land itself. In court, Umatsu remained defiant. He sat without regret, describing his actions as justified. Families listened as he referred to their loved ones as burdens. His lack of remorse deepened the wound. Psychologists debated his sanity, but the court declared him competent. He was sentenced to death by hanging. Some felt relief, others emptiness. No punishment could bring back the lives lost. His words left stains as permanent as the crimes themselves. The massacre sparked national reflection on prejudice against the disabled. Activists argued, Umatsu's words echoed hidden discrimination, society ignored for too long. His crime was not born in isolation, it reflected currents of stigma, silence, and neglect. Japan was forced to confront how it views vulnerability. The tragedy revealed more than one man's hatred. It revealed cracks in compassion, gaps where dignity was not defended, and silence that allowed violence to bloom unchecked. For survivors and families, closure never came. Every birthday missed, every empty chair at a dinner table served as a reminder. Nurses who tried to protect patients carried guilt, though they had fought bravely against an unstoppable force. Trauma lingered in every corner of Sagamihara. Their grief was quiet, but it was relentless, a pain that cannot be erased by time or justice. The massacre left a scar across generations, impossible to heal. The Sagamihara massacre remains one of Japan's darkest moments. 19 lives were taken, dozens scarred, and an entire society confronted with its failures. It revealed how hatred can become action when ignored, and how silence can be as dangerous as violence itself. Today, the memory endures not only as tragedy, but as warning. Darkness does not need shadows to thrive. It thrives when we turn away. That night in Sagamihara ensures Japan never forgets. The echoes of these stories remind us that evil does not always arrive with warnings. Sometimes it hides behind familiar walls, silent streets, and the lives of ordinary people until it finally steps into the light. What binds these stories together is not just tragedy, but the chilling realization that darkness often thrives where we feel safest. The unknown is never far away, it lingers in the shadows of our own routines. If you dared to listen until the end, ask yourself what horrors remain hidden around you, waiting for silence to open the door. Subscribe for more, and tell us where you are watching from, if you have the courage.